Hi, so this is a demo of how to create an HTML form so that if you wanted to incorporate this into your project. So HTML forms, they're essential for collecting user input on a web page. Now, HTML5 introduced a lot of new input types and attributes that enhance the user experience and make form validation a lot easier. So for this video, I'm going to just show you how to create a simple HTML form, HTML5 form with various different input types. So the first thing you need to do is open up your HTML editor, and we're going to create a page called form.demo.html, and we're going to add some basic structure. So let's start off with um, the doc type like we normally do. And then we're going to have our HTML tags. And then we'll create the two elements, the head and the body. Okay, and then within our head, and again, these are just the basic um, tags that you would place in your HTML page. So you could literally like have this as a template, and then when you need to create a page, you just pull up the template and then save it as something else so that you don't have to retype all this, or that should be equal, or you can just cut and paste from your template so that you have all of this already typed. Okay, and then I'm going to give it a title of form demo. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, the first thing you want to do when you're creating a form is that you need to add the form elements, okay? So the form elements have an opening and a close. Now the form element contains the form that's going to be on the web page. The form tags specify the beginning of the form area, and then this closing one specifies the end of the form area. Now you can have multiple forms on a web page, but they can't be nested inside of each other. The form element can be configured with attributes that specify like which server-side program or file that's going to actually process your form. Um, it can include attributes that'll say like how the information is going to be sent to the server, and then it can also have attributes that will actually name the form. So we're going to add those. So we add those, like I said, they're attributes of the form element. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to name it, and we're going to give it a method of post. We're also going to give it an ID because if we need to call it using like, server side or something like that. And then the action is going to be like whatever the website is or whatever the file is that's actually going to process it. Now, because we're doing HTML, we have to actually, we can't process it within itself because that takes a trip going back to the server. So we would like maybe have like maybe a PHP page, that it would actually process our form, or you could actually have, if you're using some kind of external um, page to process your form. So there is a free kind of page that has an endpoint that will receive any kind of post requests. Um, and it will display back the form data, as like a JSON response, and we can use that for testing. So that is HTTPS colon slash slash HTTP bin.org slash post. Okay. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now, again, like I said, the action here, that's the attribute that specifies like where the form data is going to be sent. So what we're doing is whatever someone enters into our form fields here, we're going to actually send it to this website. Okay. And then the method here, this specifies like how to send the form data. Like the two options are going to be post or get. So the get and the post methods, they're two HTTP request methods that are used to submit data, say from a client, such as like a web browser, to a server. And they differ in like the purpose, of how you're using it and how they actually transmit data and their impact on browser history. Now, if we were to use a get here, the get is used to request data from like a specific resource. The parameters would be appended to the URL of the form in the query string. So when you would process this form, whatever page it would go to, you would literally see within the query string, which is that URL, you would literally see like all of your values. And then, of course, because of that, there's a limited amount of data that can actually be sent because that URL does have a length restriction. And then, like I said, the thing is data is going to be visible in that URL. So you don't want to use that method if you're sending over something that you don't want someone to see, like personal data and things like that. That's mostly used like when you're doing searches, like if you're doing a product search or something like that, and you have a form where somebody is filling out like what the product is that they're searching for. It's okay that that's going to be up in the URL because that's not any kind of, private information that we have to have some security concerns. But when we're actually passing like name and address and telephone numbers and things like that, we don't want that to appear in the URL. So the get method would not be the method for that. But like I said, the get method would work like if you're doing a search or something like that. Also, the get method can, the results of it can be cached and bookmarked. So wherever it takes you to, the page that it takes you to, that has is going to have like those values within the URL, you can bookmark that. And so then you can actually just go back to that every time. And like I said, that method is going to be more suitable for non-sensitive data retrieval. However, the post method, this is used for submitting data to be processed, like I said again, to a specific resource, but it uses parameters. The parameters are included in the request body that's being sent. And it can handle a large amount of data. So you can have a form that's collecting a lot of information and passing that information. And then the data is not going to be visible in the URL. It happens all behind the scenes. But the thing is, the resulting page, of course, can't be cached or bookmarked. And this method is more suitable for sensitive data and actions that, say, modify like a server state. Okay, so now that we have our attributes in our form element here, now let's move on to some of the elements that we're going to be using directly within our form that are going to be showing up on our form. Now, a text input, it's the most common type for collecting like general text. So let's create something like that. And then I'm going to kind of explain it. So we'll say input, that's the tag, and it is type text. And we give it an ID because if we have to refer to it, we give it both a name and an ID. IDs are more used for like I said, more for server side scripting and things like that. The name a lot of times will be used for JavaScript, but you want them to kind of be the same. You want to always provide both because you're really not sure how you're going to be processing, maybe how the other end is going to be processing this form. And you just want to have, it's just best practice just to have them both. And then we're going to put the attribute required. Okay, so like I said, these two here, they're the ID and the name, they're used for like identification for this input box. So these have to be unique. Okay, these must be unique because when we need to refer to this box, we're going to be referring to it using either the ID or the name. And then, like I said, the type, um, that just says that it's using the input is using the type text. And we'll get into some other types that we can be using. And then required, this required attribute makes it so that the field is mandatory. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that, and then let's view it within a web browser and see what it looks like. Okay, so all we have here is just a form that we can actually type into. So we'll add some more features onto this form to add a little bit more. But all that did was that input that created this form, this text box here. Now, if you notice for that form field, we didn't really have any kind of label. So um, we need to indicate like what information is going to go in that text box. So we do that by adding text, but in HTML, HTML5, we can, what we used to do is just put text here, that would say, okay, username or whatever the case is. But with HTML5, we can do this using a label element. And the label element in HTML, that's used to associate a text label, say, with a form element, typically an input element. And this association is important for accessibility and usability reasons. Um, so one, for accessibility, you might have screen readers for visually impaired users, and they can use the label element to provide like additional context and information about the associated form element. And this makes the form more accessible and user-friendly for people with disabilities. Um, it also provides like a clickable area, so when a user clicks on the label, it typically sends focus or activates the associated form element. And so this increases the clickable area, making it easier for users to interact with the form. And it's especially useful for like checkboxes and radio buttons. And then as far as like readability and understanding, the label provides a clear and visible description of what the associated form element is for. So this is beneficial for like all users, not just those with accessibility needs, because it improves the overall user experience and reduces, any kind of confusion about, okay, what is this text box for? And then, of course, for styling and layout, we can add CSS. We can apply CSS to the style of the label element. And so this allows like designers to be able to control the appearance of the label and, of course, create like a more visually cohesive design for the form. So let's go ahead and add a label to our input element. And we're going to add it above the input element. So we just say label, and then we say for. And the for attribute is we set this to the ID of the associated input element. And like I mentioned, as far as accessibility, this linkage, linking it to the actual element, which is this, is for accessibility. And then we just put in between, this is going to be, a pair, and in between we actually put what the text is that we want to appear as the label. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and save that. All right. And let you see what that looks like. Okay, so here we have the label, and then we have that text box now. Okay, so next I want to add an input for a number. Okay, and number input, it's used for collecting like numeric values. So I'm going to give my form fields a little bit of space in between. Okay, and of course I could do that. I could create a div and style it with like maybe some padding at the bottom or something like that. But for now, I'm just going to just use some line breaks. Okay, so let's add, first of all, let's add a label. This is going to be, and we're going to call this element quality. That's going to be the ID. So I'm going to go ahead and just add that. Or I should say quantity. What am I saying? Quality. Quantity. Okay, let me fix this. Okay, that's what I get for adding my label before I actually add my form field. Okay, so I'm going to say input, I'm going to say type, and this time I'm going to say number. Okay, and you'll see the number is this, like I said, this is used for collecting numeric values. So it adds some features to that interface that makes it a little easier for you to be able to add numbers. And I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. So my ID is going to be that quantity. And again, remember, I'm always reminding you that spelling is crucial, especially when you're trying to connect a label with an input element, because it's not going to just assume. And like I said, I try to be, especially for this, make sure you're case sensitive as well. Make sure that you pay attention to your case. Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to make this required as well. Um, but because of the fact that what it's going to create is sort of like I said, a control that's going to be able to capture numbers. And I want to be able to add some constraints onto what someone can actually enter. Remember, I told you that's the beauty of HTML5 because it allows us to add certain validation, certain like business rules and things like that onto our input boxes or input elements. So one of the things that we can do is we can set a range, an allowable range that someone would have to enter. So they can't enter anything that's outside of that range. And we do that using the min and the max attributes. So I'm going to set a minimum of 1 and I'm going to set a maximum of 10. Okay. And then, like I said, the required, of course, makes it so that is mandatory. Now, before I show you everything, I want to just kind of finish as far as building the rest of it, and then we'll dissect the page as we take a look at how it runs. Okay, so I'm going to put again some line breaks there. So the next one I want to show you is if you need to collect a date, okay, then you would use a date input. And this is used for allowing your user to be able to select a date. So again, I'm going to go backwards, but I'm going to add my label first, but that's okay. I'm going to be a little bit more careful this time. So this is going to be for birthday. I'm going to create an input box that's going to collect a birthday. So I put birthday that's going to be the ID of the input element. Okay, and my input is going to be type equals date. And that's what's going to allow us, it's going to create that UI, that user interface that's going to allow us to be able to select a date. ID equals birth date, name equals birth date required. Okay, so again, it uses the type date, and then we have required so that we can make sure that they enter it. Now, I'll do some links to some other, like I said, there's a lot of other input types that I'm not going to be showing here, but I just wanted to show you the basic ones so that if you want to incorporate a form, an HTML5 form specifically into your project, then you would be able to do that. Okay. The next one I'm going to show you is the input, the email input. And this is similar to the text box, but its purpose is to accept information that must be in an email format. So if you want to collect email and you don't have to write like a bunch of JavaScript that's going to actually validate that it's in the proper email address format, then you can use this type. So again, we're going to start off with the label. And I'm going to name this ID my email. And it's going to be for the email. Okay. And the input is going to be type equals email. Okay. And name equals my email. ID equals my email. And I'm not going to make that one required. Okay, last let's add a submit button. Now, this is not going to be an HTML element, but it is necessary to be able to process the form. So when it's clicked, it triggers the action that's up here on the form element, and then causes the browser to send the form data to the web server to that particular, to whatever this action is up here. So for the input element, we use the type submit. And then we can add like a value attribute that indicates like what should actually be on the button. If we don't add a value attribute, then it'll just say submit. But we want to we want to enhance the user experience. So we want to tell them what they're going to be doing when they click on that button. So we'll say input type equals submit, and then the attribute value sign me up. So this is obviously like a mailing list or something like that. Okay, so since that's a mailing list, then we really need to make this required. Okay, I'm going to take this out so that that's not required. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that. Okay. Now I wanted to show you a few other ways, but I'll save that for next week's part of next week's lecture. When we get into more specifics. But let's see what this looks like now. I noticed I did have something missing before I move over. I forgot my end quote there. That's why that was highlighted. I love these HTML editors, because they will kind of flag when there's a problem. And I was wondering why that was still bold like that. So I forgot to. So just make sure that if you forgot it as well, if you were copying exactly what I had, just make sure that you end that quote there. Okay, so let me go ahead and resave that. Okay, so this is what our form looks like now. So we've got, we can put something in the username. See how, look at the number type. See how it adds like this, like kind of toggle. And notice it can't go below 1 because what we set that minimum at 1, and it can't go above 10. And even if we try to type in an 11, it's not going to let us process this. Okay. But notice it gives us that max, and then gives us that minimum, and then the date Look, it brings up this nice little calendar. Years ago, we would have to like write all this different scripting to make this happen, but now with HTML5, all we had to do was give that input, that type attribute of date, and then it pulls up this nice little calendar here that we can use. And then, of course, this is going to help us validate. So, if we put the wrong thing in there, it's going to flag us. And then the submit button here, because we did give it a value attribute, then it put like whatever what we wanted on there. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this out, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like when you process it using the test action that I gave you. But of course, that's just for testing. Um, when you actually create a web page, you're going to be sending this form data somewhere. It may be somewhere on your website, like if you have like maybe some kind of server side code, like a some PHP or something like that. Or it may be sending it to some kind of external web page to be processed. Okay, just like what we're doing, we're sending it. So you would have something else in that action, but for now, that action contains a test that whoever owns that website kind of gave us something just so that we could be able to test it. So let me fill this data out, and then we'll go ahead and process it so that you know how your form should look if it gets processed correctly. Okay, so I've got the information filled out, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the sign up button. Okay, and this is the website that it takes you to. Remember, this was in my post. Okay, this was in my action, rather. I'm sorry, in my action attribute. And so it just takes us, like I said, to a web page that just takes that data and then just kind of feeds it back to you in a JSON format. So you can go here and you can look to see those were the different, like the IDs that I gave each one of those input boxes. That's the information that was entered in there. And so this way you kind of can check to see if your form actually works correctly. So hopefully this gives you some kind of, maybe think about an idea of how you would be utilizing a form on your website, and go in and create as far as the form using the techniques that we talked about, and add a nice form, onto your website. Other than that, have a great day, and see you next time.